What was the most petty thing an adult did to you when you were younger? I was in middle school at a friend's sleepover. Her parents were very strict. She and her siblings got pulled out of public school to go to a Catholic school, were homeschooled in high school, and they scared the hell out of me. Anyway, it was probably like 11 PM at this sleepover, and her mom hesitantly let us watch the Disney movie Xenon, Girl of the 21st Century. I laughed at her part, and even though her parents were awake, they came into the living room to scold me for being too loud. Not long after, I took a drink of water, choked, and started coughing. They called my parents after 11 PM to come pick me up because I couldn't behave. They had no regard for them being asleep and having jobs to get to early in the morning. They wanted me out for laughing and coughing in the span of about 10 minutes. My parents never let me stay the night at her house again, and are still pissed at them for doing that almost 20 years later. I was feeling sick one day in grade 3 or 4 and the substitute teacher wouldn't let me go to the nurse's office because I didn't look sick enough. I had strep throat. I was at an Easter egg hunt when I was around 6. It was in a big park area with lots of rocks. I saw a little chocolate egg foil glisten and ran over to pick it up. As I reached my hand out to pick it up, a man trod on my hand to stop me getting it. Then he called his kid over to find it. My mom asked if I wanted to play 52 card pickup while my friends were over. I asked her what it was and she said I either want to play or I don't. I told her I didn't want to play anything if I didn't know what it was. She got visibly irritated and threw the cards on the ground and said, "This is 52 card pickup. Pick them up." She then threatened to ground me as she watched me pick the cards up and put them away nicely. I think it was worse because my friends were watching. Edit. Thanks for all the awards and comments. A lot of people are talking about how abusive my mom sounds and it led to interesting discussions with my husband today. He agrees that my mom was abusive and feels she was way worse than his dad. I think his dad was worse. Admittedly, my family and neighborhood set the bar low on good parenting. Most of my uncles and both of my grandmas were physically abusive. I have cousins that were raped by their own brothers and made to repent as young children for their hand in their own sexual assault. Great job, Mormons. And other cousins who weren't allowed to finish high school. We took in a lot of cousins. My parents also made it very clear who in the family wasn't safe, wasn't to be trusted or listened to, and which uncles could use a solid kick to the D before I ever give them a hug. My neighborhood has gangs and drive-by shootings and drug dealers and girls selling themselves in junior high. My mom parented by fear the whole neighborhood equally. I don't care if you're the leader of the mafia. My mom will scream in your face. Try her. Nobody shot a gun at our house during drive-bys and no one gave her babies drugs. I literally believed marijuana was barbecue because my whole neighborhood successfully lied to me. But that's another story. I'm 1000% positive the whole neighborhood didn't want to be on her bad side. But I think they all wanted to be on her good side too. We've got neighbors that randomly show up to chat with her, instead of going to their drug dealer next door and buying drugs. She'll be near and keep them strong and clean. So when I say she wasn't perfect, you all know what I mean. But when I say she did a lot of good, I hope you know what I mean too. When I was in like 5th grade, I didn't put a book cover on my math book. It required cutting up a paper bag, something similar. We couldn't really afford the fancy ones, and I just never did it. So my math teacher took away my math book, so I couldn't do homework or follow along in class. Like WTF. Who does that to a kid? When my mom found out, she went down to the school and raised hell about interfering with my right to an education or something. The school district was terrified of her until I graduated. In Cub Scouts, we were doing the Pinewood Derby. I worked really hard on my car. My dad helped, of course. I had already won the first 3 rounds, and before the final round, one of the dads of the other kids picked up my car to hand it to me. It slipped out of his hand and broke the wheels when it hit the floor. I'm convinced it was not an accident, and he was sabotaging my car so his kid would win. This was over 30 years ago, and I'm still salty about it. When I was like 9 or 10, I was rollerblading home from my mom's work, right? And I'm heading down 4th Street, and I find something like $16 on the ground, a 10, a 5, and single, just laying there on the sidewalk next to some outdoor seating at a cafe. Being the obnoxiously nice kid that I was, I pick it up and kind of look around, wondering if anybody lost their money. That's when the lady in the weird sweater vest comes around the corner. We make eye contact and I tell her I found this money, and she goes, "Huh, let me see it." And my naive ass is like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. She's a grown up. She can sort this out." She looks around, hands me the single back, puts her finger to her mouth in a SHHH gesture, then she just ducks off, never to be seen again. My swimming teacher removed my inflatable armbands while swimming in a deep part of the pool because I was not paying enough attention out of excitement. In elementary school I used to talk to the lunch lady every day, and then the one day I didn't say hi, she came to my lunch table and told me I was fake, phony, and a few other things and stopped speaking to me. I still don't understand what her problem was. My aunt was unpleasant or weird with everyone but always particularly cold to me. One day when I was about 14 she took me aside and said she'd held a grudge against me because of my name. She had wanted to call her first daughter that name but my parents had had a child first and used it. They had no idea she wanted the name and aren't the kind of people who would have done it on purpose. She said she'd tried really hard and had just about forgiven me for it. I just remember being baffled by it and then feeling sorry for her for being that spiteful, to be honest. But it pulled later in comparison with all the other crazy horrible things she did to her own family. I got in trouble in 6th grade for reading during homeroom. Homeroom was like a random 30 minutes period to work on homework, but I always did my homework the night before so I would just quietly read. For some reason my homeroom teacher hated it. One day she just yelled at me for always reading in her class and told me to do my homework. I told her all of my homework was done. She told me to prove it so I showed her all of my completed homework. Then she confiscated my book and sent me to the principal's office for being disrespectful. I'm still salty about it. My swimming teacher promised me a candy bar if I jumped off the board when I couldn't swim, and when I did they said they forgot, but I saw them eating one in the lounge. I was 5 and I was betrayed. Another thing that swim teacher did instead of teach me to swim was to try and teach the group how to keep their eyes open underwater and see. We all had goggles and had to take them off to do this. Also I didn't learn to swim there. I ended up learning at a hotel on vacation when my sister taught me like a year later. Had a teacher in kindergarten threaten to expel me because I was sick and didn't show up the day before. She put me on the spot in front of the whole class telling me not to lie and that she'd call the principal. I cried in front of the whole class not knowing what to do. Apparently she wanted to win some attendance award and thought confronting a child was a good idea. Like bruh, I was fking 5. Still salty on how she got away with it. Grounded me for leaving a hanger on the dryer. Then extended it for reading while grounded. Then further for sleeping when told I can't read. It still pisses me off years later. In high school, I was suspended for letting out a little toot. My mother and stepfather allowed me to get my learner's permit at 16. Then at 17 they allowed me to sign up for driver's ed classes. Yet when it came time for road practice, where you drive with an adult in the passenger seat, they absolutely refused to let me drive either of their vehicles. I even told the teacher and she confronted my mother by asking her how she expected me to learn. I got maybe 5 hours of road time thanks to my brother-in-law before I took my road test. It went as well as you might imagine. When I confronted them they screamed at me for wanting my license and said their rates went up enough when I turned 16. I had to wait until I was 18 and schedule extra road lessons with the instructor to get my license. The best part is they lied. 15 years later I sell auto insurance. Unlicensed teenagers don't count on your policy, and licensed ones can be put down as excluded. We were almost out of ice cream. I made myself the last bowl. I came into the living room to eat it and my dad took it and ate it all because I didn't offer him any. I was about 8. I'm 41 and I still hide while eating bowls of ice cream. It was my dad. He was sleeping and apparently I made a noise when I went to take something from his room, so his sleep got disturbed and he couldn't get sleep after that. So, the next morning he came and poured a whole bottle of water on my face when I was sleeping. I still don't know what the duck he was thinking when he did that, maybe revenge or whatever, but that was such a petty and ducked up thing to do to a kid by a grown-ass adult. Edit. Thank you all for sharing your stories and for the nice comments and awards. It feels better to know that I'm not alone, and I hope we all can find healthy ways to cope with what our parents have done and become better in the future. I think some might be thinking that it was wrong of me to go to his room while he was sleeping, which I do agree with, but my dad sleeps very early, so I had gone to take my homework notebook and I made sure to make no noise at all like I always do because that's where I used to keep my books. But yeah, then that happened : I don't know what to think of the situation, but it was a very traumatic experience for me and I found it really childish. I just made sure to never bother him again after that, so yeah. When I was young, my mum was best friends with one of the neighbors down the street, who also had a boy the same age as me. As a result, I played a lot with said boy and was encouraged to be best friends with him. Whenever my mum wasn't around though, his mum was a complete bitch to me. She would come out to where we were playing together and shout at me for some minor trivial thing. If we were both doing something bad, only minorly bad, we were not bad kids, she would blame it all on me and never reprimand her son at all. This was all when I was like 7-10 years old, and so I couldn't process it at all and had no idea how to react, and it really got to me. I found out years later she was basically jealous because I was doing much better at school than her son and she wanted to take me down a peg. Ultimately, the son and I ended up going to different secondary schools and drifted apart, which meant that fortunately I stopped having to interact with her. Our mums are still good friends and she has always been pleasant to me as an adult. She even did the flowers at my wedding. But even 30 years later I still keep her at arm's length because of how unfairly she treated me as a child. My 6th grade teacher didn't like me. I had transferred into her class when the tag teacher was needed elsewhere, and this teacher was resentful. She was going to have the class read The Hobbit long before any movies. I was excited. I had ready read it and the trilogy the year before. She called me a liar in front of the whole class, then went on a tirade about how kids like me were terrible and thought we were better. I was a quiet, shy girl and cried. She mocked that too. The rest of the year was hell. She let her pets, officers' kids, it was a school near a Navy base, bully me. I was never good enough. She couldn't fail me because I excelled at bookwork, but she picked on me at every turn. Trash human. One of my uncles was in a years-long fight with my mom. To stir trouble, anytime he greeted my sister and I, he would tell my sister how beautiful and wonderful she is, and to me just say, "Oh, you're here too," and then promptly ignore me the rest of the night. I used to adore him up to that point, so this ended up in me being extremely hurt and crying to my mom for hours about how I'm ugly and not special. He got his petty vengeance on my mother and crushed my self-esteem. Till today I don't forgive him for it. The trailer park manager for the neighborhood I grew up in. When I was 7 or so, a bunch of friends and I went to one of their houses to play outside. After about 20 minutes of being out there, the manager pulled up in her car and told us we couldn't play there because that was someone's yard. Well, the parents came out and told her that, yes, we were all allowed to play in their yard, and that it was fine. That wasn't enough for her because she told us all to go home anyway, and got our parents to take us home when we wouldn't leave. When I was 10, an aunt told me to stop eating so much, or you'll get fat like your parents and sister. I believe that was the first time I've ever wanted to clock someone. P.S. That aunt was 100 pounds heavier than either one of my parents at the time, and is close to 200 pounds heavier now, while both of them have lost 75 plus. A teacher in my Catholic grade school was also the mother of one of my classmates. He was kind of a bully, so when I had a birthday party I didn't invite him. She confronted me about it and would go out of her way to make school miserable for me. When my parents brought it up to the administration, she denied it. Now, I wasn't actually Catholic, just went there because it was a nice school. So as an actual member of the parish, she was believed over me. I ended up needing to move schools before I got to the grade that she taught. When I was probably around 8 or so, I was at a baseball game with my family. Naturally, I was hoping I'd be able to get a ball, and one of the players saw me in the stands, looked directly at me and threw a ball to me. Then some guy, probably college aged, proceeded to reach over my shoulder and snatch the ball before it got to me. I turn around and he and all his friends are laughing and celebrating. Almost 20 years later I'm still a bit salty about it. I lived in China for a year when I was 17/18 and spent a good amount of time traveling and staying in hostels. One day I slept in. I was staying for free in a hostel that wasn't legally open yet, so there were no outlets to charge my phone. So no alarm, and was just barely going to make it to the station in time for my train. Bear in mind, this was a 40-hour train that only ran once a day, and I didn't have the money for a new ticket. The taxi driver got to the end of the street which the station was on and turned to me. He said, "It's 10 QI to drop you off here. If you want me to take you to the station entrance it's 50. I ended up paying because I needed to make that train, but I was upset and furious. I have met some of the kindest, most selfless people in China, but like anywhere in the world there are some absolute D-heads too. 30-plus-year-old man made it a point to walk up to me and call me by a racial slur when I was about 5-8 years old in front of the crosswalk lady. Nobody said it in response. I could fill up a ducking subreddit. My high school required uniforms. This extended to pay, but we instead had to wear one of 2 approved pay shirts and khaki shorts. I only had one pay shirt. It had a hole in the armpit. As I walked past, my dad hooked his finger into the hole and yanked to rip it wider. Then he laughed at me when I said I had enough problems without him causing more for me. My dad again took me fishing and told me to invite a buddy. 3 hours in, we hadn't caught it, but my buddy and I didn't say it about it. My dad asked if we wanted to just go home. I said yes and he itched me out, called me a mama's boy, dropped me off about a mile from home so I had to walk, and told me the car had to be washed when he got back. My buddy backed me up when we got back. My mom did not. Oh look, it's my dad. I came home from school and he randomly said, "Today, studying Spanish." I told him I had other homework, but he didn't care. As soon as he left, I started doing my other homework. He came back and took away my book, grounded me, and made me study Spanish. My teacher didn't believe me when I told him my dad wouldn't allow me to do my homework. I definitely don't blame the teacher. That makes no sense. A math teacher handed back our tests in class. They were graded and marked and all that. She was going over some of the questions that most people got wrong, myself included. So I was writing down some notes on my test so I could reference it later and remind myself why I got things wrong and what I was supposed to do. She ripped my test away from me and started screaming at me that cheating is absolutely not allowed and that I should be ashamed of myself. Confused and in shock, I started choking up and tried to explain that I was just trying to take notes. One of the most humiliating times of my childhood, around 13 years old, and I still don't understand why it happened. My father-in-law waited until both of my parents passed away to become a D. Now he talks bad about me to people and smiles in my face. Only reason I know about it is because my niece and nephew pulled me to the side and let me know. I hope and pray for my sake that he never needs to move in with us when he gets older. Cause that it ain't happening. But, is that petty of me? Oof, there was a lot. My mom shoved into me and I asked what was wrong. She said, "If you have to ask, I'm not going to tell you." She could be super petty AMD between 2001 and 2019 really just did not like me at all. 2001 to 2009 was probably the worst. She would burst into my room to yell at me when I was doing homework. She freaked out at me and screamed at me when I was gifted a webcam that led to her kicking me out of the house. Over a webcam, yeah. So a month or 2 after she kicked me out, she bragged about how she bought my brother a laptop with a webcam built in. I questioned her and she just gave me this smug little smile. They also bought my brother a new car at 18. That year for my birthday I got jeans. So, yeah. About 8 years old over at a friend's house. Family was pretty trashy, and friend and I were eating the candy we'd bought and the mom flat out said to me, "I might be skinny now but someday it's going to catch up to you and you'll be super fat just like me." That stuck with me forever. For background purposes, my full legal first name is Abby. Just Abby. All 4 letters. Nothing more. My 6th grade social studies teacher one time kept calling out the name Abigail one day. That's not my name. So I don't respond and looking for this new mystery person. She gets up and comes to my desk and asks me, "Why aren't you answering me?" Me. "You called out Abigail, not Abby. Abby is short for Abigail. Go to the principal's office for being disrespectful." I went to the principal's office. P. "Why are you here?" Me. "Teacher called out for Abigail and I didn't respond." P. "Why did you not respond?" Me. "My name is Abby. Just Abby." He pulls up my record and confirms that I am not and never have been an Abigail, and sends me back to class. My teacher never called on me again. Not being allowed to have any other food during cookouts other than a lukewarm grilled hot dog or an overdone hamburger, because apparently everything else is grown-up food. Jeez. I'm glad I'm an adult now for small reasons like that. I had to walk home from the field when we lost a playoff game. I wasn't working hard in my English class at school and still got good grades. It annoyed my English teacher to no end. One day I was called to the principal's office and he was there to complain about me. He said I would never be good at English and that I should be downgraded to easier classes because I would end up failing. The principal asked me what grade I got and I told the truth. I had 89% at the time. I ended up staying where I was with the same teacher. Today I can say I'm not bad at English even though it's my second language. I was moving away from home to go to college, and I asked my parents if I could borrow one of their PCs to take with me. The family had 3 and it would just be mum and dad at home after I left. Mum got enraged at the cheek of my asking. She said that she was going to lend me one but now she won't because I asked. She did, however, find a discarded PC and monitor at the local dump and gave it to me. That of barely ran solitaire, but I made use of the monitor. It always gets me even now. It would have been worse surely if I expected to be lent one out of entitlement rather than asking. Her logic never made sense though, and I'm still untangling all the contradictions and panic I feel every day about everything I say and do. I was in school and it was Friday. We were doing afternoon arts and crafts. I was a little more colorful personality wise as a kid, so I was chatty. My teacher yelled at me in front of everyone, "You are a real pain on Fridays." Out of nowhere, I was upset and shocked. I remained quiet for the rest of the day. My dad used to make fun of my butt saying it was fat and he would call me Fiona the monster from Shrek. Confiscating my phone for a whole week for listening to classical music while studying. Mum kicked me out when I told her she ought to stop taking the only money I could earn post high school to buy herself drugs. Had a teacher who absolutely hated me for no reason in grade 5 or 6 tell me I couldn't go to the bathroom during a test because another person was in the bathroom at that time. NBD. I waited and went when they returned. I had to poop, so I guess I was in there a while. Just as I was exiting the stall to wash my hands, she opened the door and scolded me because she thought I was just loitering in the bathroom. Then proceeded to practically drag me back into class by my arm. Of course the whole classroom was staring at me. Back when I was 17, I moved to Nick with a friend for 3 months to work as an intern. That was my first time living in a dorm full of strangers in a foreign country where I knew the language haphazardly. Just started really using what I learned at school. The day I got there, I was sitting in the kitchen with my friend, just joking and our usual gimmicks. Some tenants show up and were introduced to me. A couple from Detroit were also there. I noticed the boyfriend being distant but thought nothing of it, and there was no interaction between us whatsoever. A few weeks later the girlfriend came up to me, told me I need to apologize to her boyfriend. I asked why. She said, because I was making fun of him the day I arrived and he held a grudge since then. I was thinking, what the duck? I was joking with my friends hours before I even saw your fat ass entered. You 30 years old but got hurt by some girls yorking in German and giggling and just automatically made the connection between our laughs and your weight. But shy young me went to apologize anyway and was made to listen to him lecturing me about manners. I got a 0 on a history assignment in 4th grade because I improperly cited a source for one of the pictures I used, meaning it was plagiarism. The citation I used was from the educational website I got the picture from, and it was to the format she wanted. I simply forgot a period at the end. Duck you Mrs. Easton. This was at least 2 decades ago and I'm just remembering it. Was forever making comments like, well, you look like you've lost some weight, haven't you? To purposely humiliate me. Man, I was 10 years old. I never was heavy. He said it just to spite me and make his son feel better. More indirectly to me, but when I was graduating high school, my aunt asked me which of my late grandfather's rings I'd like as a graduation gift, along with a card and a little cash. I told her I really appreciated the offer, but jewelry just isn't my thing and that I felt like it would be wasted on me. I do have other items passed down from him. She said okay, no problem, and I thought that was that. Graduation came and went, and a couple weeks later a few family members are over for dinner. Well, I'm standing talking to another aunt, her sister, and she walks over to us and hands me a little box. At this point I know what it is, and even though I had respectfully declined before, I decide I'm going to open it and give a wow, great thank you. I open the rings box, and before I can get a word out, the aunt I had been there talking to absolutely loses it. Are you effing kidding me? You give that ring to him. Yelling at her, yelling at me, making a huge scene. Guess that ring specifically was one she had made known she wanted. I looked at my aunt who gave me the ring, and she just couldn't hide a little smile on her face. So the extreme pettiness was really between my two aunts, and I felt like I was basically set up, used as a tool in the whole situation. Would have felt bad for my other aunt, but TBH most of her anger was directed towards me. She did apologize days later. Should mention I had a few friends over as well witnessing this. Just super embarrassing for me, especially since I had zero interest in the ring. My father would remove my bedroom door whenever I forgot to turn off the lights in the morning. I needed to earn it back every time. I used to get haircuts at the military barber shop when I was younger every 2 weeks. I was tended to by a barber I never had before, and I told him how I wanted my cut low, faded, and a part on the left side of my head. This barber put the part near the middle of my head, and when I told him that wasn't how I wanted it, he told me verbatim, "That's too bad." I still had to pay him for my haircut. 2. I never got a part in my head again. 23 years and counting. Another thing, of which I still don't understand, is one time when my dad farted. He laughed and said whoops. When I farted, he made me walk up and down a flight of stairs 3 times. I had a teacher who despised me and belittled me at every turn. He was a petty tyrant. Years later he was arrested for molesting students. I enjoyed reading about it.